You know, I've been thinking, ever since I started doing these essay vids, I've come across a ton of Gran Turismo competitors, and it seems as if every single Japanese developer has at least made one in their catalog. But surely there's someone who hasn't made one yet, like Sega. I mean, they are the best when it comes to making arcade racers like Daytona USA, Sega Rally, Sonic All-Star Racing. Surely they wouldn't make a Gran Turismo clone game like the other developers. You've gotta be kidding me. Back in the 2000s, many games were made to capitalize on the success of Gran Turismo from numerous studios, from the familiar Forza by Microsoft, the more obscure titles from Japan such as Enthusia from Konami, R Racing Evolution by Namco, and then there's this. This is Sega GT, a game by Sega. Shocker, I know. Developed and released in the year of 2000 for both the Dreamcast and Windows PC, with WoW Entertainment and Tosei as developers. The former is known more nowadays as Sega AM1, one of Sega's in-house developers responsible for some arcade titles such as the House of the Dead series, Virtua Cop, and various console titles from Valkyria Chronicles, Skies of Arcadia, and of course Sega GT. Meanwhile, Tosei is a studio mainly known for developing Nintendo's Game & Watch Gallery series, and many other products. The studio itself is mainly known as a contract developer, mostly working as a support team, so that kinda explains why they're here. The game was intended to be a rival to Gran Turismo, but as expected, it was ultimately overshadowed by the latest Gran Turismo at the time, being GT2, and the subsequent release of the PlayStation 2. So despite all its glowing reviews, the sale number was just alright, and with Sega discontinuing their own console manufacturing shortly after, its sequel Sega GT 2002 had to be carried over to the original Xbox instead. But we don't have to talk about that one yet. Within the first few seconds of booting the game up, you can easily smell the 2-decade-old wine already. This game has that 90s to early 2000s stank from the menu, music, and player interface. Just like every racing game at the time, this game boasts some of the more basic features you'd expect. Within the championship mode, it's also filled with options you're most likely already seen a lot, with the exception of the carrozzeria. While progression certainly follows in a similar manner to Gran Turismo, its details make up for the differences. For example, within the license option, we have a driver's test for your general driving school and license game. But then there's also the Works Cup, an option for those of you who want to earn a race car by specific manufacturers, although it is mostly Japanese manufacturers only. For the licenses, it is separated into E, B, A, and
You picked the wrong house, fool!
with each license test prepared by select manufacturers, mainly the same ones from the Works Cup. Getting a license in this game is almost as hard as trying to gold a GT test though. It is pretty hard and requires near perfect driving. This game truly demands perfection and mastery of the game's handling, especially if you plan on getting the fastest lap record. Did they hire Sonic to set the times or something? Just look at the difference between the fastest lap record and the qualifying time. Unfortunately, or fortunately, this is the only thing available in the license test, a challenging 1-lap time trial. While I do appreciate the challenge this provides, I wish there was a bit more variety in the mix. You only need to clear one manufacturer's test to gain the license though, so there isn't much repetition on this side of the content, unless you're going for 100% completion. In which case, let's talk about the main meat of the championships. So what do we have on offer? In the race selection, we can also see the races divided into official races and events, which limits the cars based on its criteria. Sega GT takes a completely different approach to championships to GT, as they have the usual classification cups like the NA Cup, with the addition of having its sponsored championship with actual brand names instead of being the usual basic classifications. So we do get stuff like the Virgin Time Attack, Penzel Open Race, or the McDonald's competition, with a Happy Meal toy as the reward. These sponsor cups also stack, but winning another sponsor event after another one will add up the cash prize. Extremely helpful in case funding is needed, and it generally works as a fine way to add something like a sponsorship system. And while they do have one-make races, it's not a specific car requirement. The only restriction they have is something along the lines of the car's general criteria, be it size or type. So you can bring up any fitting car and you'll have a race with only that car on track. Speaking of which, how does Sega GT fare with its car list? It has 130 cars from Audi, Daihatsu, Honda, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Toyota, Subaru, and Suzuki. Interestingly enough, the European version of the game contains several additional brands such as Renault, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, and Mercedes-Benz. All vehicles are purchasable from the dealership, containing both new and used cars. Although this UI is certainly a bit clunky in the visual department, it's hard to notice the second tab of car brands and the used car dealership. To buy cars though, you need to earn the corresponding license first, so you can't buy an A-class car if you haven't obtained the A license, for example. Though earning cars from the races aren't exactly hard either, with most events only containing 1 to 3 races with a car reward at the end. For the time, all of these cars look pretty great. By comparison to Gran Turismo 2, they certainly look fairly close in graphical fidelity. Unfortunately, the game came out in the same year as the PS2, with a significant improvement over its predecessor, and then GT3 came out a year later with its marginally better graphics. And for upgrade options, you get the usual performance tuning, with very minimal visual customization. Upgrades are handled similarly to Gran Turismo. You can equip and remove stuff from the car in the garage option. Regardless, you'll be spending quite some time in the tuning menu because this game is pretty challenging for the time, especially with how detailed the tuning and setup menu can be. While I did talk about the difficulty during time trial events for licenses, this difficulty also translates into pretty much the rest of the game, with qualifying for each race on certain events and the AI drivers as well. Even with a somewhat upgraded car, I'm still behind by 3 seconds, and 1 or 2 AI can just completely leave the pack in the dust. These guys are aggressive as well, while taking the most efficient corners most of the time. They're so effective, your Gigachino is gonna turn into a Betachino. This is unless you've mastered the handling and the track. Don't even try with Forza tactics because it's not gonna work most of the time. It's best to practice and get used to the physics, as unfortunately the later cars drive like boats in this game. Even a race-tuned R34 with racing tires won't save you. On the bright side though, the tracks are a delight to experience. With a lot of them being fictional tracks, this approach is certainly interesting for a game trying to compete with Gran Turismo. Just like with Enthusia, this allows the developers to really go hard on the unique visuals and add some pretty neat verticality. So despite the amount of time you'll be repeating the same tracks, the repetition can be alleviated by the challenge of the AI and some well-made visuals, like the snowy mountains and its tunnels, a sunny hill track, the rocky canyons, and they even got their own version of Special Stage 5. With a total of 22 different tracks available, it's unlikely you'll get bored of the views, at least until they start repeating for the later cups. But now we get to finally talk about this game's best feature, the carrozzeria. I have no idea what this means, but I'm just gonna call it the car factory. Here we get to create our own machine with some limitations, mostly based on the licenses you can acquire and the cash in your pocket, which is gonna be a lot. To make cars from the B class or higher, you must beat even more tests using your own car, meaning you have to make an E class car no matter what. Here you get to choose the displacement, which will generate the car's class between E to SA. Pick which engine type you want in the car. If you want the car to be naturally aspirated, turbo, or supercharged, put the engine in the front, mid, or rear of the car. Engine placement will determine the car's available drivetrain, so unfortunately we can't make a mid-engine front-wheel drive monstrosity. And the final touch of picking the car's chassis, with the option to change its body kit between a couple of options, and then you can finally destroy the competition in your homemade supercar. The best thing about this feature is the AI can also run in their own custom cars, so be prepared to have some custom car duels. As a side note, just like with the car roster, it seems there's even more regional tomfoolery happening, as this factory mode also features extra body kits locked behind the Japanese version. This car factory feature in Sega GT is a fun and rewarding way to create and customize your own car. You can experiment with different combinations of body types, engine sizes, colors, parts, and tuning settings to create a car that reflects your personality and style. You can also use the factory car in the career mode and the versus mode, and see how it performs against other cars. Sega GT certainly is a very interesting game. Being a competitor to Gran Turismo, released at the very tail end of the PS1's life cycle, and Sega's unfortunate hardware escapades didn't help its case with the PS2 and GT3 completely drowning its competitions, with the only criticism I can have being the UI interface being pretty confusing at times and the boat-oriented handling. And it's certainly a very challenging racer, even for its time, but with only straight racing and time trials, it lacks variety. However, the car factory mode is still one of the most unique features I've ever seen in these sim racers, so hopefully Sega can capitalize off its creation and make a big improvement later down the line, and thankfully they did. years later, Sega returned with a follow-up titled Sega GT 2002. The title was developed for the original Xbox due to Sega shutting down console production after the Dreamcast had to accept defeat by the PlayStation 2. The result is this game ends up receiving a massive upgrade in the looks department, and fortunately the gameplay does too, from the handling, gameplay variety, and the UI interface. Still developed by WoW Entertainment or Sega AM1. For the sake of context, I am playing what is known as Sega GT Online, an updated version of Sega GT 2002, which came out 1 year later with the addition of well, online mode.
No shit.
Plus a new mode called Gathering and 40 new cars. If it's not obvious already, the UI design has undergone a massive improvement, with a much clearer direction on which goes where and how. An early indication of the game growing in its own identity and starting to back away from just being a simple Gran Turismo inspired game. This UI goes even further than that with the way the dealerships look, and even the addition of a fully modeled player garage for the career mode. Other than that, it's nice to see colors other than black and red for most of the time during the menus. With the handling massively overhauled, this game is already a major improvement over its predecessor. The cars actually turn this time around, but it does come with a major drawback of balancing. You're not seeing it wrong, this car is just busted, and it's mostly thanks to the new handling making any lightweight car into undefeated monsters. Plus the level of grip is so high, even the rear-wheel drive cars like the RX-7 rarely spin out, which may be a good or bad thing depending on each player. Stepping into the world of Sega GT 2002, we're greeted into this overhauled career mode carrying a sum of 13,000 loan from the bank. From here we can browse the whole car selection, check their car models, prices, and even look at some of the limited ones. With the addition of Bugatti and several other brands, this game contains a total of 29 brands and 165 cars. Obtaining them on the other hand is pretty interesting. For the most part you can just earn them by winning the main career mode events, and those you can purchase in addition to the ones you've unlocked from the gathering mode. And this is our new home, the garage. Here we can perform a number of activities, with the garage where we can switch rides, put them for sale, and fine-tune them for racing. A number of shops available from the car dealership, the parts shop, and a used parts shop. Yes, this game can sell you used car parts, and it also features parts degradation. They come at a cheaper price at a lower durability than what you would normally get from the regular parts shop. And if by some rotten luck you have purchased a bad batch of products, well... This is certainly a very unique effect and mechanic, adding even more stress with the damage penalty, which will deduct your prize money for repairs. The career still features both official and event races with the major overhaul towards access. Official races are now separated into different stages, during which we get to pick the order between 3 races. You have to beat all of them to progress to the next stage, each race having its own rewards from your trophy cups to cars every now and then, with even more interesting ideas with the use of sponsorships with real-life brands, like the fact that Canon's logo is plastered everywhere during the replays as the official brand sponsor, and the event notification being heavily reminiscent of Sega's arcade heritage. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the changes with licenses. Unlike the original Sega GT in Gran Turismo, licenses here are meant to gatekeep the skill issues from the rest. You cannot progress to the next stage without clearing them first. License tests are time trials with a durability bar on the right. It decreases every time you hit the walls or go off track. Sounds like a really good compromise from Gran Turismo's instant fail, and this method also makes sure players can wall grind as well, at least not too much. Either way, this will be the progression loop for the official races. It's clear, simple, and honestly has a lot of charm you'd expect out of a Sega title racer. And then we got the event races, which just like before contains a lot of brand sponsored events and the classification events. Event races are used to gain either a lot of cash, more trophies, or a lot of free cars, with cash rewards split between the top 3, and for cars, well, it's either you win or earn the special reward. Special prizes require you to overtake 3 opponents on the final lap, so going from 6th to 3rd, 5th to 2nd, or 4th to 1st. Thanks to Thunder THR for the information on this. Although some of the events are only open on certain days, so it's best to keep a lookout if you spot a no entry sign in case they open up. If you still need to gain some cash, then the other option is to put the car for sale, which this game gives its own unique spin with its system. While you can sell the car normally via the car dealership,
Nope.
wait, I can't sell my own thing? Come on, man. Or well, maybe not. They seem to completely block selling price cars. Instead, you can put the car up for sale with your own price tag and then wait.
One eternity later.
Look, I never said it was gonna be quick or easy. The system tries to emulate a real-life auction with this, and it can be downright annoying if you're strapped for cash. You can lowball to increase the odds of the car getting sold, or you can go high and pray some schmuck is dumb enough to buy your overpriced rust bucket. So while we wait, why not check out the other offerings this game got on its hands? Introducing Chronicle Mode. This mode is what I would consider as a love letter to motorsports and the history of cars. It's a pseudo-career mode where you pick one out of a number of classic cars, go through several eras of motorsports while gradually upgrading the car you have, starting from the 70s with some visual filters to increase the immersion, at least for a while, the early 80s and the start of Audi's all-wheel drive domination, the late 80s with the peak of rally culture, early 90s and the rise of American automotive, late 90s with the Japanese and European manufacturers taking a crack at the American market, and finally the early 2000s. Throughout every era, you are only allowed to use the car you pick at the very start, so you choose your upgrades wisely, especially once you have to face off against the 2000s powerhouses. Win every single race and you unlock a car for use in quick play, with a total of 12 cars to unlock and 6 classic cars, giving this game mode a moderate amount of replayability with its bingo card reward system. Then we got the Gathering mode, which functions like a challenge series mode split into 3 different activities. A time trial mode reminiscent of classic arcades with its limited time and checkpoints, technical test being the only game mode forcing players to actually drive like a proper professional racer, and Gymkhana, which mostly revolves around maneuvering around cones. Although in this case you can just hit the cones anyways because the game has no penalty system in place for these situations. Each challenge stage has 3 ratings, although they don't really matter for the reward. But what is the reward anyways? Each stage unlocks cars for purchase in the career mode. But as I mentioned previously, the highest rating score is not necessary for it, so it's actually quite chill. And with a total of 30 events, 10 for each activity, you're gonna have a lot of options in case you get bored of the regular racing events. And also 30 new cars to play around after the fact as well. Sega GT perhaps is one of the best Gran Turismo competitors to have come out. The amount of progress and improvement between the original game and its follow-up is quite astonishing. The original, while being an alright game on its own merits, is a bit misguided here and there, from its weird UI design, lack of variety, and its questionable handling model. But it also has the Car Factory, a first in the simcade market, the interesting approach with its track designs, and bringing in a lot of real-life brands and sponsors for gameplay purposes. And then 2002 just completely rebuilt everything, remade the handling, brought in a very good UI, brought in even more variety, and generally just improved on every single aspect of these games, while adding a bucket full of charm with its visual presentations. I'd say the first one is an alright game that I would recommend if you're curious about their first attempt, and if you have that itch to create a monster machine that can dominate even Christian Horner's design. 2002 on the other hand, I would absolutely recommend. It's just a great experience all around, and it has a bit of content for everybody, and it made me feel like I'm playing even more of Sega's brilliant arcade catalog. I'd recommend using the CXBX emulator as I've used it. A guide for it's available in my Discord server if you're interested. Either way, it's going to be an interesting experience overall. While you do that, I'm gonna be here, waiting for someone to buy this car.